My name is Daniel, and please enjoy a little ghostly history from America's capital and an iconic structure known for pride and freedom and ghosts. The most recognized house in the world, it's the White House, a storied history told through its many ghosts, most notably the great emancipator, Honest Abe. The revolution is finished. Brits pushed out. General George Washington inaugurated as its first president of the United States, a proud time for all Americans. And then a contest is held looking for the best architect. Many designs submitted and only one chosen. This drawing by an Irishman named James Hoban, a powerful design based on the Leinster House in Dublin, Ireland. A cornerstone laid in 1792 and many men put to work. An important task given to enslaved and free African Americans as well as immigrants. They were the ones who built it in only 8 years. Perfect timing, as the year is 1800, the first century of America. Now sadly at this time, George Washington was out of office. He never saw the White House completed. Only 1 year before its completion in 1799, he fell sick. And after doing chores at his home in Mount Vernon, being a former general and president, a little sickness wouldn't stop such a man. And then it got worse. 3 doctors rushed to his side. They called it inflammation of the throat. George Washington died at 10 p.m. on Saturday, December 14th in 1799, at the age of 67. His final words were, "'Tis well." The last moments of this man truly represented his greatness, never losing calm or putting his family out, as recorded by Washington's longtime secretary, Tobias Lear. The president refused extra care, even stopping his wife from running out into the cold to retrieve help. Had the presence of mind to make sure those around him were comfortable, to look over his will, and then give instructions on how to handle his body. Those last words embodied his peace with death and a life well lived. And 1 year later, John Adams was the first president to move into a newly built White House. Now, confusion of facts is common after 200 years. Many reasons are thought for why the British marched into Washington in 1814. The War of 1812 was done in Canada. American forces pushed out after battles in Stony Creek and Niagara. Many historians say the attack on Washington, D.C. was revenge for attack on York, now called Toronto. But some disagree, including us. As told on the Ghost Walks of Niagara-on-the-Lake, it was revenge for Newark, now called Niagara-on-the-Lake. The small historic town was once the first capital of Upper Canada, now Ontario. Just before Christmas in 1813, it was burned by American soldiers and traitors to the British Crown, not out of anger and not planned for violence, simply to deny the marching British shelter during a very cold winter. There were casualties, however. Inadvertently, the soldiers chased women and children from their homes. Some went into the woods where they froze to death. Records are spotty, no official accounts, but revenge was swift. Then began a campaign of terror. From Youngstown to Buffalo, New York, everything was burned by marching British regiments, until a gentleman's agreement to stop the attacks, and the British agreed. However, one American regiment missed the communication. A town just outside of Niagara-on-the-Lake was burned. Is this the reason for a new campaign into the United States? Everyone does know that the British marched on Washington in 1814. Buildings lit on fire, including the Capitol building and White House. And then Washington was saved, not by battle or force, but an act of God. Rains and winds swept down on the burning town. Eyewitness accounts tell of a hurricane sweeping through Constitution Avenue. So powerful the winds, they lifted 2 cannons and threw them about as soldiers from both sides ran for cover. And after the war, North America settled. current President James Madison commissioned original architect James Hoban to return and restore the White House. He also ordered some fire-charred walls to be left to act as reminders of what happened there in 1814. 142 rooms, 6 floors, all inside 55,000 square feet, along with 5 ghosts inside the White House. Like William Henry Harrison, president in March 1841, dead in April 1841, shortest presidency in U.S. history. Pneumonia took him, said to be caused by poor weather during his inauguration. Not war, not assassination, but a cold. The fragility of humanity affects the highest of us, and a sad end for the determined man who finally succeeded to office after 2 attempts, all because he wanted to look tough, failing to wear a coat and hat. The first president to die in the White House, this and that famous determination may be why he remains. Harrison is experienced in the attic. Staff go up there to retrieve documents from archives. From distant aisles they may hear papers shuffling. Some, knowing the stories, hopefully run to greet other staff. Most realize they are alone. Others hear furniture and items being dragged across the wooden floors. Those witnesses are sooner to finish up and leave, keeping their head down as not to greet the long-past president. Inside the White House, saying the thing has a separate meaning away from the famous John Carpenter movie. This is not a movie monster. It's said to be the ghost of a 15-year-old boy, seen inside the White House mostly during the Taft administration. It's in the early 1900s when a military aide named Archibald Butt saw the ghost. Proven history, as he mentioned in a letter to his sister. He said the ghost watches over his shoulder while writing at his desk, then feeling pressure pushing down on his shoulder just like a small hand, as if the boy is leaning over, curious of what Archibald is writing. Butt's life took an interesting turn in 1865. When returning from a vacation, he boarded a ship from Southampton, England. The ship was called the Titanic. He didn't make it back to Washington. An interesting side note, President Taft was a very serious man, and when hearing about the supposed thing, he was quick to call it fake, told Butt to tell all staff if any of them were caught spreading such nonsense, they'd be fired. Then there's Andrew Jackson, the founder of the Democratic Party and celebrated hero general of the War of 1812. He was the commander that turned away sweeping British forces at the Battle of New Orleans. Would become America's 7th president in 1829. Mary Todd Lincoln heard him, said he stomped and swore while pacing up and down the residence area hallway. Harry Truman may have experienced his ghost too, also confirming Mary Lincoln's story, but all depends how you read the 33rd president's letter to his wife Bess, where he said, "I sit here while listening to the ghosts walk up and down the hallway. I can picture Andy arguing with Teddy." He was talking about Andrew Jackson and Theodore Roosevelt, maybe wishful imagery or actual experience. I personally hope for the latter. But it's true, they all think Jackson's ghost is an ill-tempered sort. In life, he was known for holding grudges, felt he was owed the presidency in 1824, and then ousted by John Quincy Adams, finally winning in 1828, the very next election. It's said Jackson brought anger into the White House, as shown by how he treated those considered supporters of his rival Adams, only made more extreme by the death of his wife. Dying of a heart attack just 3 weeks after his election, Jackson blamed the stress of a dirty campaign and the attacks of Adams and his people. As proven at Rachel Jackson's funeral, he said of his supporters, "May God Almighty forgive her murderers. I never can." And speaking of Adams, Abigail was the mother of John Quincy and wife to John Adams, the second president mentioned before, living in the White House for only 5 months before Thomas Jefferson defeated her husband. Funny how a woman who was happy to leave Washington is said to remain. because Mrs. Adams did her own laundry. In life, constantly trudging wet clothes in the East Room to hang for drying. Seen by staff with arms outstretched, dressed in cap and lace. It was the same ghost enthusiasts of the Taft administration, the ones who experienced the thing, who saw Abigail, saying she'd wander that same hallway into the East Room, still wearing her cap and lace, wet clothes draped over her arms. Any talk about ghosts in the White House, and everybody thinks of the same man. I'm talking about Honest Abe Lincoln himself. The stout commander led the United States through a massive civil war. Known for being ahead of his time, Lincoln freed the slaves, wanting a country truly built on rights for all. His amazing run as president ending early on the night of Friday, April 14, 1865. While attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, an actor named John Wilkes Booth snuck up behind the president. Up in the box while relaxing during the play, Booth put a bullet in the back of Lincoln's head. He was later shot and killed while trying to escape authorities. Abraham Lincoln died one day later inside the White House. His wife Mary comforted the president as he passed. And today Honest Abe stands as the most known ghost inside the White House in North America and maybe the world. Lincoln and his wife were spiritualists. His wife later known for this, but he also believed, such as in prophetic dreams, as mentioned in a letter he wrote to a former law partner in 1865, just days before going to Ford's Theater. He wrote about a vivid dream, how in it he walked into the East Room past guards standing on opposite sides, saw a large crowd sitting in chairs, their heads all bowed down, and on the front table lay a figure, stone still as if a body draped in thin fabric. Lincoln woke up with a dreadful feeling. Did this dream foreshadow his death? He would have believed it, as proven in a previous letter written to his friend Joshua Speed back home in Springfield, Illinois, in 1842. He said in the letter, "I always did have a strong tendency to mysticism," written 20 years before his son's death in 1862, long before his wife's public support of spiritualism and long before his own prophetic dream of death, proving the Lincolns believed in ghosts before and during their time at the White House. And he remains, as proven by many distinguished guests, including Grace Coolidge, who saw him standing in the Oval Office. The wife of Calvin, America's 30th president, experienced his lanky figure as a shadow blocking the light, said it was Abe himself, looking out towards an old Civil War battlefield across the Potomac. Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands saw him in the strangest way. While staying at the White House in 1942, it's nighttime. Wilhelmina wakes as a knock at her bedroom door. She stumbles out of bed, swings open the door to see a tall man with a wide beard. Said he wore the iconic stovepipe hat. His prominent face stared forward into the room behind her, the experience ending quick as the Queen fainted. Upon waking, the man was gone. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill experienced Abe too, while visiting Roosevelt during World War II. Innocently taking a bath, he walked naked into the Rose bedroom, cigar hanging from his mouth. He noticed a stranger in a chair by the fireplace. He almost yelled at the man before realizing it was Lincoln. The ghost calmly stared out the window, and Churchill standing frozen until the ghost was gone. And speaking of Roosevelt, his wife Eleanor used the Lincoln bedroom as a study. She reported feeling his presence all the time. Ronald Reagan agreed with Eleanor Roosevelt about the Lincoln bedroom. The Reagans' beloved dog Rex had an experience. On the first time he went into the Lincoln bedroom, the spaniel perked up, started barking at an empty corner, like the little dog was showing dominance to an empty space, and then going quiet, before crying and backing out of the room, tail between his legs. Rex refused to enter the bedroom again, and Maureen, President Reagan's daughter, stayed over with her husband on many occasions. Because of the history, she preferred sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom. And one night her husband Dennis woke to see a man standing by the window. He was facing away from the bed looking outside, and then slowly turned to reveal that prominent and serious face, staring back but never actually looking at Dennis before the man vanished. He woke Maureen, told her what happened, but she didn't believe a word of it, instead sharing it with her friends, family, and staff to make it a running joke. And not long after the joke ended, one morning Maureen woke to see the same man staring out the window, told others the sun shone around him and right through his transparent body. Lincoln slowly turned again, looking back towards the bed before vanishing. And then there's Mary Todd Lincoln. Famously known for her belief in ghosts and spiritualism, said it strengthened greatly after the tragic death of her son Willie, who died of typhoid fever in 1862. Abraham handled the boy's death with fatherly grief, telling all, he was too good for this earth, God called him home. But Mary wanted proof the boy remained, setting up spirit circles and seances in the Red Room. Non-believers and skeptics say it was from her grief, mixed with a growing insanity. Helped along by the Lauries, a family from Georgetown. Cranston Laurie, his wife, and daughter Belle were family friends with the Lincolns. His wife and daughter were also known trance mediums. They led those seance nights in the White House, legend states up to 8 times. The focus of them? Speak to Willie. Now Mary told her half-sister later, Willie lives. He comes to me every night and stands at the foot of my bed. And even after Abraham's death, the Lauries remained close friends of Mary, daughter Belle receiving the gift of a blood-soaked lock of Abe's hair after the assassination. It's a bit of a strange gift for sure. The Laurie house was a center of spiritualism for many. It's said Belle was very gifted, once successfully levitating a grand piano, and Mary Lincoln stopped the practice after social pressures due to politics. However, as far as we know, she never stopped believing. We've reached the end. This has been a ghostly history of the White House in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States of America. We'd love to hear any personal experiences from those who toured the White House. Please share below. Ghosts make history just that much better. Thanks for watching.